Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. I've got a very special guest joining us on today's episode, the second time that he has joined us on our show. I'm very grateful for that. Konstantin MALOFEEV. He is the chairman of the Tsargrad Media Organization. He is an entrepreneur in Russia. He was sanctioned by the United States and a bunch of Western governments in 2014. I still don't understand why, because he is trying to make Russia great again. He is a Christian man, a devout Christian, and he stands for sovereignty for all peoples all across the world. So he's also one of the most influential men, if you will, in Russia. The Economist just published an article about him. We're going to be talking about that and much more in today's episode, like what is going on between Russia and the U.S. Konstantin, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. I want to start off by discussing this article in The Economist. It was a profile upon you and many other influential figures in Russian politics, including, of course, your wife, who is the presidential commissioner for children's rights and children in the Russian Federation, as well as Professor Alexander Dugin, someone who you work with closely. I'm curious what your thoughts were on this Economist article. And also in the article, I noticed that they talked a lot about you and your wife. Explain to me also how Christianity guides the work that you are doing in Russia in both of your separate jobs.
This Economist article at first shows that journalists in The Economist, they're a little bit far from Moscow and from what is going on here. So it looks like a little bit, she reads newspapers, bloggers, open source intelligence or whatever, and trying to be an insider. Who is she not? She is not. So this first. So this article is interesting, but this is not a real detailed analysis of what's going on in Moscow alike, let me say. But okay, with this my first impression, let's speak about this. First, people who mentioned there, of course, they are here. They gathered because of journalists decided that they are all together because they're new faces. And this is the difference between the old elite and the new elite, which grew up with the war. So this is an impression, which is not exactly correct, because who grew up? Tsargrad, that she mentioned, Tsargrad is 10 years old. And Tsargrad started in that Donbass campaign when the war in Ukraine started 10 years ago. Always in the West, they're trying to convince people that war started in year 22, which is not right. It started in 14. In 14, when it was a coup in Ukraine, and when the new regime overthrown Yanukovych illegally, and then part of the people of Ukraine in Crimea, in Donbass, they were against this coup. That's how it started. So Tsargrad appears those days. So, it's already 10 years long. And for me, we stood for these values. We was standing by, what is correct in English, for these values for all these 10 years. And let me say that now we live in the country which Tsargrad wanted Russia to be 10 years ago. So this is a Tsargrad around. So the federal media all now, have the same agenda as a Tsargrad had 10 years ago. So I'm not a newcomer. Maybe a journalist of The Economist knew about me a couple of years ago, but this is not how it was in reality. But this article shows that these people in The Economist Western establishment trying to understand why Russia did not collapse as they wanted and as they predicted 3 years, 4 years ago when war started. So they're trying to find arguments and reasons why it didn't happen. And for this reason, this article is very interesting. So they're trying to find a solution, and solution that new light is coming. And this solution or this argument, I would buy. Yes, we are coming. A new light which would never give up. We would continue this war for Russian national interest and for Russian world and for our values and for Christianity. And we could not be bought by houses, accounts, wages, and salaries for our relatives in the West. So this new light grew up. So I can say that with this solution, the Economist is correct.
It's interesting.
And
they're
about,
trying.
yeah, okay, please.
I was going to say it's just interesting. They're trying to understand Russia, but based on what you told me, it sounds like they didn't even reach out to you for comment on this story.
No, they didn't try. No, that's all you know about the professional fake media journalism. So they did a huge article and they didn't try even to touch or to contact. And I can't say about all figures that they mentioned, but not me, not my wife, never got any call from the Economist magazine.
Well, I want to get your thoughts also on the Trump administration because things are not going as swimmingly as Trump hoped for. He's still trying, I think. But I saw that you made this interesting video. It was posted on your media channel on Zargrad about there was these big no king protests in the United States. JD Vance made a meme, AI video he posted of Trump with the crown on his head. And you posted a very interesting video in response with the real king being President Putin. Tell me about this and the message and your thoughts on the Trump administration right now.
Oh, when I saw the JD Vance meme about Trump, and of course I couldn't, as monarchist, I had to react that it was no kings in U.S. That was like the rebel against the British king when U.S. appeared. So the monarchism in U.S. this is something very exotic, but not so exotic these days that it was before. But nevertheless. But in Russia, Russia was a царство, kingdom, or empire for 1,000 years. So for us, this is very, very natural. So the real Tsar and the real emperor, in comparison to Trump, this is Vladimir Putin. That's why in my meme, that's him who is in imperial crown, and Ukrainian Cossacks, like in very well-known movie from Soviet time, 50 years old, came to Winter Palace to St. Petersburg, knocking down and asking the Russian emperor protect them. And one of this Cossack, with the face of Zelensky, of course, this is the matter of meme. So I found it's nice that with JD Vance, we have the same approach to our bosses, let me say.
What do you think about these negotiations, though, with the Trump administration? I mean, Trump admitted that only about 18% of Donbass territory is still not under the full control of Russia. And that number is going down day by day. One would question why the Trump administration is not somehow forcing Zelensky to negotiate a peace settlement.
Uh, Important to understand that after 4 years of war, it was built a big structure or system of economy of war. This is not only military complex, but all this institutional wire transfer of money with back payment. And in Biden time, we know how big it was, with even Bankman-Fried participation in this, with FTX scandal, with Hunter Biden notebook. We know this. Now, in Trump time, they're moving this economy of war. They're like trying to slide it to Europe. So in Europe now, so many people, so many officials, so many politicians are involved in this economy of war, when they are like sending to Ukraine, 1 million and getting back like 20%, 30% for their corruption scheme, for lobbying of this. So many people making money on this war, so they do not want to stop. And in the US as well, even in Trump time. So this is the problem, to stop the war, the economy of war. There's so many people making money on that. This is very gray zone, nobody controls. And you have Ukrainians who always can send you any bills, accounts, signatures about that everything is transparent, that you always would be covered. And plus to this, they did this for 4 years. Can you imagine how many files with compromise for U.S. officials, for military complex managers in Europe and U.S. now in the hands of Kiev regime? Not only Kiev regime in hands of Western politicians and secret services, but vice versa. Kiev regime and Zelensky and his team have these files in their hands. So this corruption, this economy of war, is driven to the continuous of fight.
Mm-hmm. JD Vance yesterday said that this is the hardest war in all of history to negotiate an end to. Is that simply because Russia is winning?
Yes, of course. This is hard to negotiate with somebody who's winning, trying to push them to make a peace on a worse terms for them. Of course, this is hard. So just do the peace, and the terms that President Putin continue to repeat, always the same from the last June. So it's more than 1 year. He's saying that now in our constitution is Donetsk Republic and Lugansk Republic, so it has to be in our territory. So you have to make a peace when this territory would be inside of Russia. And okay, let's agree on denazification and demilitarization, neutral status of Ukraine, do not be the part of NATO. This is the reason why this war started. So it's always the same. 4 years, the same words from President Putin. And it looks like the newcomers from the West to this negotiation table trying to start from zero. Like, okay, let's try to make a new deal. President Putin repeat the same to the newcomers. Okay, Helok, Witkov, Rubio. He repeats the same, and Lavrov repeats the same. And for U.S. Official who just came, they just think at that like and look at that like, okay, President Putin is very tough. No, he always said the same. But if we would conquer this territory by ourselves, then easy, of course, our demand would grow up, because this is already ours. And if we wouldn't make a deal now at these terms, probably tomorrow, winter, or next spring, we would have other demand. So to do the peace right now, to make peace, to be a peacemaker, J.D. Vance and his boss has now to push Ukraine, not us, because Ukraine could be pushed. It's easy. Stop to help them, stop, your intelligence and your data to be transferred to Ukraine, stop to help them, and they immediately would agree. And that's it. But you are not helping us. How you could stop to do something that you are not doing? To push us, you have no any instruments. You even cannot stop our oil trade with China or India. So how to stop Russia with sanctions? You have to make a deal with Russia, to negotiate with Russia, not push Russia. Russia is too big. And President Trump said this in the very beginning, that we won the war with Napoleon and with Hitler. How they're going to win us with sanctions for oil products? This is impossible.
Yeah, and also no one cares about the sanctions anymore. But there was one very big development that took place this week, and that was surrounding the nuclear question, the N-word, as Trump puts it. You had, of course, the threat of long-range missiles to Ukraine, nuclear-capable Tomahawks. Not too long after that, you had Russia unveil the Budavestnik missile, the Poseidon nuclear submarine torpedo. And I want to get your thoughts on the message, if any, there is behind the unveiling of these weapon systems, because these are unparalleled in any other country on the face of the planet. And then also you had Trump just 2 days later go out and say that the U.S. is going to violate the moratorium on nuclear testing. They're going to renew nuclear testing in Nevada. So what is going on here? It looks like in some cases with Alaska, reform and rapprochement and efforts at peace, but in other cases, drastic escalation we didn't even see during the Biden administration.
This Burevestnik, which could be translated into English like storm caller, or if you want storm light from Sanderson fantasy book, this is an almighty storm light. And Poseidon, which is their antique Greek god of the sea, all these mighty names really means the very heavy, like apocalypse weapon, which could do a lot because of this portative nuclear engine that they have. They can fly with hypersonic speed, or they can do 100 miles under the water, and they can reach coast of US in any direction, if we're talking about Poseidon. So this weapon just shows that Russia and Ukraine is not equal. And when US and Europe trying to, they're playing the game like Russia and Ukraine are fighting somewhere with this conventional weapon, and we just have to push this, Russia with economical instruments, to make a war. They forget that President Putin didn't use our most important weapon, which are best in the world. And let me see what President Trump could show, which is close to Burevestnik or Poseidon by capacity. So Russia didn't use this because this is a civil war for us, the war with Ukraine, because Ukrainian people are Russian people for us, just a little bit zombied by propaganda and by all these Nazi rituals. But we believe that they are our relatives. We're same blood, they're same people. So we do not want to kill them massively. And because of that, we do not use nuclear weapon yet. But in the case of war with Europe, with somebody who is not so close to us, they're not our brothers, they're not our relatives, think about that we would use nuclear. And we have a bunch of this nuclear weapon, and we have the best nuclear rockets. So that's what Putin shows, that do not play, do not forget, to this very unresponsible, sometimes very funny, ironically, funny, stupid, funny politicians, European politicians, when they're trying to frighten Russia, when they're trying to be, tough in talking with us. We didn't start yet, as Putin said, because this is a civil war. Civil war you do with the weapon when you want to avoid a massive number of victims. Yes, we have already a lot of killed from both sides, but still it's not so many if nuclear massive destructive weapon would be used. So this is the message. So do not play with Russia. This is the message.
Mm-hmm. As a final question for you, and thank you so much for your time. I was very hopeful after the Alaska summit. I think individuals like yourself who are immersed in these centers of power, I think you're probably far more realistic than I am about what is going on here. But in fact, the last time we spoke, I asked you, if Trump comes in, you think they're going to drop the sanctions? You think there's going to be peace? And you're like, Jackson, let's be real. But this Budapest summit, what is going on with this? Obviously, as we've discussed, as you've mentioned, the cards are in Russia's hands right now. So the idea that they're going to sacrifice anything to appease the West is out of the question. But then again, it seems as though Trump should be begging for these sorts of meetings, not to demean him, but that's just the position he's been put in by the Biden administration, by Ukraine, by NATO, by the EU. Why is there hesitancy, I guess, and maybe a lack of interest in hosting this meeting in Budapest between the leaders once more to continue the talks from Alaska?
I think their problem with postponing of this meeting is that when presidents talk each to other, they understand each other quite well. We can, we know the reaction of Trump and we know the reaction of President Putin, and we understand that they have a good personal relations and good understanding between them. But after their direct talk, by direct line, direct conversation, it goes to advisors. And on US side, as I understand, and as I told you before, they're still too much corrupted by Ukraine people who made the money with these previous 4 years of war, which probably have their back payment channels with all this military supply or with this economy of war. And they are still supportive, very supportive for this war to continue. Each and every next month, with continuity of this war, bring them millions, probably tens and hundreds of millions. And these people would fight for this. They would struggle for this. And, these people which are still there, which is not so close. I do not think that J.D. Vance, for example, one of them, of course, because he's newcomer and he's quite strong in what he's saying and he's straightforward. But for some others, we can say that they're still on, not on the Ukrainian side, but on corruption side. So they want this to continue. And I think the problem why they did not meet, because, these advisors, these people in inner circle, or probably the circle not so close to Trump, but still influential in Washington, they're doing everything for this war do not stop, for them to make more money. So the military complex, the lobbyist firms, which are corrupted by Ukrainians or corrupted vice versa, Ukrainians corrupted by them, but they making money on US budget, on European Union budget, on all these flows in gray zone coming to Ukraine, which nobody controls. So this is the real lobby behind of Budapest postponing the meeting. And of course, the media on the top is the Washington Post, which always, they always for anything to break any peace efforts of Trump administration with Russia. So I think the Washington Post is making good money on that as well. Not directly, but some of their advertisers we have to thoroughly look at.
I'm sure they are. Hopefully not for much longer. Konstantin MALOFEEV, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jackson.